to the new rebooted version of a show that we're calling Junk Food and You. There was a previous version of this, and this will be sort of similar, where I used to interview people that were in the sort of candy business, or some people that had interest in candy or anything like that. We're going to do that on this show as well, but we're adding another feature where I'm going to start doing podcasts just by myself, just talking about maybe some history about the Candy Critic, stuff I've had happen to me, sort of candy experiences, that sort of thing. I have this sort of collection of stories that I've always been telling people about candy and junk food and about being the Candy Critic, and I thought maybe it might be neat just to put them down on tape, so you guys can hear them. So if you don't happen to meet me, you won't hear you may not hear these stories. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do stuff while I'm telling these stories, because I figured that way it seems a little more comfortable, a little more natural. The final thing I'm going to do is every time that I'm going to do one of these, I'm going to enjoy a special treat. Today's special treat is a Taiwan banana milk. I got it because of the cool package. You'll see a picture of it. I'm going to throw graphics on here every once in a while, particularly if stories come out about things that I might have some photographic evidence of. But yeah, the Taiwan banana milk. Well, let's start off by tasting that. It's weird, it gives a sound, which tells me that it might be carbonated, or it has a bit of carbonation in it. I'm kind of convinced that all canned drinks have a bit of carbonation. I mean, the main question I have about the Taiwan banana milk is, I didn't know you could milk a banana. So I don't know if this is banana, if this is milk made from bananas, or if it is banana flavored milk. So I'll find out. It's definitely banana-y flavored, kind of a fake banana flavor, which I'm not a huge fan of. It's not horrible, it's kind of a subtle fake banana flavor, so I'll accept it. So you'll see me enjoying sips of this Taiwan banana milk now and then. I'm also going to be working on, we have a mini comic that I'm working on. It's going to be a micro mini comic, which we're going to be having on the site. You'll be able to see them. Once they're ready to go, I'll post it all over the place. But the idea is it's a really small comic book, and it's going to be called Snack Facts, which is based on, we used to have on our Instagram feed, we used to call it Snack Facts, and we used to just post these little facts about snacks. But I've decided to sort of turn it into a book. I've got a character and everything like that. It's based on another book that I'm doing about the history of chocolate, using the same characters, but I'm going to do like small little sort of information booklets about certain snacks. I'm sort of working on the first few issues right now. I've been posting a few pictures here and there on our Instagram feed, so make sure to check that out. You can go to candycritic.org and find links to all of our Instagram and stuff like that. But I'm going to sort of work on that. I'm going to talk to you about sort of the origins of Candy Critic. And the origins of Candy Critic kind of come about in two parts. The first part is my childhood growing up with sweets. The second part is sort of how Candy Critic actually got started. So I'm going to get to work on this drawing. I'm doing a little bit of inking on I'm working on the thumbnail, sort of the rough version of the early story part. But yeah, as far as candy when I was a kid, the person who I give the most credit for making me sort of have a love of candy is my dad. My dad used to take us, he comes from a town called Thorold, Ontario, which is just near Niagara, which is, Niagara Falls and all that. And Thorold is a paper mill town. So it used to be well known, and I think it still has some paper mills there. In fact, I used to have memories of going to my grandfather's. To me, Christmas smells a little bit like paper mill. So whenever I smell a paper mill, that sort of rotting smell that most people don't like, I actually get nostalgic for Christmas. So my grandfather, lived in Thorold, and we used to visit him, as I was saying, particularly on the holidays. And one of the things my dad would do is he'd take my sister and myself out on these walks. And these walks would be sort of through Thorold and St. Catharines, which is sort of the neighboring place. And we used to eat, one of the things we'd always do is we'd stop at this little store called Busby's. And Busby's was just a sort of standard corner store, but this was in the 80s, so this is when corner stores, penny candy was a big thing, gummy bears were a big thing. Just to give you a bit of idea, this is when potato chips used to come in paper bags. It's kind of important to the story later. But we used to stop at Busby's before we'd go on these walks, and we would go to Busby's, and my dad would buy us a bunch of candy. Now, my dad had just as much of a sweet tooth as we did, and we all had favorites and stuff like that at Busby's. My dad used to get these cones that were filled with sort of this syrup, and you bite into them and it's all gooey. And my sister and I would generally go for whatever was the hip candy of the time. So be it Nerds or Gummy Bears or whatever was sort of kids were into. Busby's would always have sort of a pretty good selection of the newest stuff too. So we would always sort of have a selection of that and always have a handful of our favorites and maybe a chocolate bar or two. Always a bag of chips too. We'd all get a bag of chips. Again, we'll get into that later because of the paper bags. But then we'd go on these walks, and we'd often follow railroad tracks. That was sort of a thing that we did quite a bit. We'd follow these railroad tracks all over the place because it was sort of an industrial town, and so there's train tracks everywhere. And this is before it was a bad thing to walk along railroad tracks. And we would walk along the tracks, and trains would go by and everything like that. And we'd be loading up on sugar. Like sugar was the whole thing of these walks. And we'd have this cool sugar buzz going, walking along the tracks. If trains came along, we'd get out of the way, off the tracks, nice safely, as safe as we could. And it was just sort of this totally cool memory of our walks in Thorold. And the main thing that was our trip to Busby's and the candy that we would get. And we'd always buy all these the new candies, everything like that. And with the chips, what we do is one of the things about towns that are paper mill towns is there's all these canals and everything. And there's the Welland Canal in Thorold and St. Catharines as well. And it's sort of a very well-known canal. It's the one that takes boats up the Niagara River. And there's all these little offshoot rivers that came off. And what we used to do is we'd get the chips that we got, and again, they came in these paper bags that had sort of a plastic coating, and we'd open our chips on the side, and we eat our chips out of the side, and then what would happen is you could go to like one of the rivers, and you could put the empty bag, and it would look like a little canoe, and we'd send it off down the river and off on some kind of adventure, and we would sort of imagine where it would go, or we'd chase it down the river for as long as we could. And so it's just this sort of fond memory I have of going to Thorold. And so, I mean, that's my candy thing. It's like we did this a lot. My dad would also take us on trips when we would go to in Toronto, where we lived, and we'd go walking through like the University of Toronto campus, or go on an adventure to a part of the city that we weren't as familiar with. And again, it would always end up with a stop at some kind of convenience store to buy a bunch of candy. And my dad would participate in it as well. And so we would eat the candy like crazy. And it would always be, I always have access to like the newest candies and things like that. And so I guess, I don't know if I had a sweet tooth, I'm not sure if sweet tooths are genetic or what, but I sort of always had a love of sweets, and that just sort of really made that love deeper. So my dad really is the one responsible for my love of sweets. And so, I mean, my love of sweets has always sort of never stopped, even when I grew up. And so this sort of leads to the next part, the next origin of Candy Critic. And this is where Candy Critic actually sort of came to be. I was studying art in school. I was at Sheridan College. And was it Sheridan? Might not have been Sheridan. Might have been later. But I remember one of our classes, we had to do a thing on web design. And we had to do a website. And I was just doing all kinds of random stuff on my website. I didn't really have a particular focus or anything like that. I would just sort of, post random little sketches, little doodles, little funny things. And then one day I was going for a walk when I was at school. And I went for a walk with a friend of mine. And we went to the store. And I discovered this thing called Sandhill Bubblegum at the store. And, it's like this thing. I go for a walk with a friend of mine. And the first thing I do is I go to a corner store and I get some candy. So, I get some chocolate bars and I got some other stuff. And we were walking, it was near the campus at Sheridan. And so I was the Sandhill Bubblegum completely caught my fancy. My friend thought I was crazy because, she was like, why, you're a grown person. Why are you obsessed with this gum? And I couldn't take my mind off of it. So I bought the gum. And basically what it was, it's the first review on Candy Critic, and it's still there now, and I still have a package of it actually that I've been saving, and I'm thinking about, I do this other show on our podcast sort of network here called In Hindsight, where I look at candies that I've reviewed in the past, and I'm thinking I might actually eat that last package of Sandhill Bubblegum as a review, as sort of a looking back and see if it still holds up the same way it did in the review. But so I got this candy, Sandhill Bubblegum. I tried it, And I thought, what might be fun is I got this weird candy. Maybe I should post a review of this weird candy. And so, as part of my website, because this was sort of a school project, we had to sort of have a random thing. So I, you know, did what little bit of coding I could do. And so I posted this review, and I thought it was kind of fun. And I found a few other candies that I liked and sort of more popular ones, and I posted reviews of those as well. And my friends started to like it, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I'm going to keep doing this. Eventually, I had to learn how to buy domain names. That was part of the project too, so I bought my domain name, and I thought, well, this candy review thing is kind of fun, so I'll continue to write about that, and I'll buy a domain name, and I thought, oh, I'll buy Candy Critic, and I bought candycritic.org, and so I continued to do it and continued to do it, and I even, I finished the art course, and I ended up studying more stuff, and eventually I ended up working in an animation studio, and I still continue to do Candy Critic. My friends liked it, and I thought it was just kind of fun, and I started building a big collection of reviews and stuff like that, and it was just fun. It was a fun thing to do. It was kind of neat to write about candy, and it was just a way to pass the time. And at the time, I was pretty deep into animation, and so it was like something I could do other than that was still creative. So I'm working at the animation studio, and one day I get an email, and it's from Google. And Google used to do this thing called the Site of the Month. And I was like, okay, Site of the Month, whatever. And I got an email from Google, and they said, we want to make you our Site of the Month. Google was a big deal at this point. This is early in Google. There were still other places like Yahoo and stuff at the time, but they were a big deal at the time. So I was like, cool. They told me, they said, oh, you should contact your server and say, hey, this is happening because you're going to get a bunch of hits. It's going to get really, really big. And I thought, that's kind of cool. My site's going to be kind of popular. So I contacted my server, and at the time, my server was really good about it. And they said, listen, we're not going to charge you for the for all that, because it's going to, what we'll do instead is if you put a little ad for us, before this thing happens, we'll let you we'll do it. We'll make sure your site doesn't go down. So basically, you'll have unlimited. You can get unlimited hits. You don't have to worry. Millions of people hit. Doesn't matter. We'll cover it. So I did that, and so Google did this, and they did this thing called the Site of the Month, and the hits definitely went up, and it was kind of neat. I was pretty happy with it, and that's sort of the beginnings of where Candy Critic started to take off on the internet, and there started to actually be real people, numbers of people checking it out, not just my friends, there were strangers. But the other thing that happened with that is something that was weird, and that had to do with television and radio. And I started getting phone calls from television and radio stations saying, oh, we saw your site of we saw you were the Site of the Month, and this is a really cool idea, and we'd like to interview you, in particular around Halloween and stuff like that. And then really quickly, one of the ones that came up was the Food Network called me. And the Food Network, they were doing this thing, and they called me and said, we're doing this show, and it's called What America Eats. And they said, we understand you're not American, but I think the context still works. And I was actually and they said, we'd like to have you on our show called What America Eats. We're going to film it in New York, and we're going to, we'll set you all up, and so we'd love to have you as being part of the show. So I flew to New York, and I spent like a week there. I actually had some friends there, so I stayed at their place, and it was all cool. And so the Food Network people met me. They did an interview with me. There was at some magazine that the Food Network co-owned. It was the CEO of that magazine. I sat in his office, and they draped candy all over the place, and they interviewed me, and they asked me about candy and stuff. I don't think this show is anywhere on the internet. I've always been tempted to put it on. I have a DVD copy of it. So maybe one day I'll post it. I imagine at this point they wouldn't really care. At the time, they asked me not to post it online. But at this point, maybe I'll do another one of these, and I'll talk about, the Food Network. I'll do a little, I'll watch it again, and we can have a reaction or something to me watching the Food Network interview that I did. So I did the Food Network interview. It was great. And then the other thing they did is they took me to a candy store, and they told me I could do whatever I wanted, that the Food Network would pay for any costs or anything like that. I found there's this little candy store in New York. It's just near Chinatown. I don't even know if it still exists. I don't even really remember the name of it offhand, but at the time it was getting a lot of sort of popularity in New York as being this sort of like really local place. There was Dylan's Candy Bar as well. They didn't want us to film there. That's fine, because I know they're a really busy store. But this little store is like, between these two stores was sort of my choice. I actually kind of liked the little store. It was very personal and everything like that. And the cool thing was they had a lot of treats that were homemade. So there was some really unique stuff there. I really was interested in trying this place out anyway. So we went to the store, and the owner was there, and she met us, and there was a cameraman and everything like that, and we did some stuff. And basically, I went through this candy store like crazy. I was opening up packages, sticking my hands in things, everything like that. Really fun time. Got to try all kinds of cool stuff. So we're going through the whole thing, and they're interviewing me. And then they only had one cameraman, and the first thing was they had to turn off the air conditioning because the air conditioning in this place was too noisy, and they didn't want my sound to get ruined. And the second thing was, so it was really hot. This was in the middle of summer that we're shooting this. So then they said, I went through all this stuff, and they asked me if I wanted to spit any of the food out as we were doing this thing. And I said, no, it's okay. I can eat it. I'll be okay. But then what they didn't tell me was they said, oh, we're going to have to do more than one take. And the reason they had to do more than one take is because they wanted to get different angles. And they only had one cameraman. So basically, I had to go through and eat everything 3 times over. And I'd already said no to the spit bucket. And the other reason I sort of said no to the spit bucket is the owner was there. And again, a lot of the stuff, she had a bunch of homemade stuff. And I sort of went for a bunch of the homemade stuff because I thought that was a really cool part of this candy store and I wanted to show it off. So I didn't want to spit out, this woman's amazing. She made these malt balls that were really good, and I think actually I reviewed them. They're on Candy Critic right now. Like one of our regular malt ball. I think there's different flavors. That's actually her malt balls from that trip. So I go through it 3 times. I was so sick after doing that. Eating all that candy, and I was just like I could not. I went to a deli afterwards and I got a salad and I just couldn't even eat it. And I didn't eat until the next day because there was just so much junk food. So I do the interview, everything like that. Takes a few weeks and it goes on the air, and that's when things went insane. That's when it went from being, I got quite a few hits when I was the site of the month. But then when the Food Network thing aired, it was crazy. I was getting, hundreds of emails a day. They estimated well over 1 million hits in one day. This was a while back, so that was a lot. And it was pretty cool. It was pretty popular. I enjoyed it. I had fun doing it, and I thought, well, I'm going to keep this going. I continued to work in the animation studio. I didn't quit my job or anything like that. And I sort of decided, kept it going, and it's been through several iterations and everything like that. And I still every once in a while get calls from radio stations and talk shows and things like that, and I still do that every once in a while. If anybody here listening to this it runs a radio station or a talk show or anything, definitely happy to talk to you. You might have to call me ahead of time if it's around Halloween, because that tends to be a really busy time. But that was it. Candy Critic sort of took off at that point, and it was pretty popular. It was and it wanes in popularity now. I would say sometimes I get quite a few hits, particularly if I've done a radio show that's quite popular. Sometimes people will contact me. Sometimes I get little boosts of hits and stuff like that. At this point, I really enjoy doing it. And it's actually given me a few other things. Like I have a literary agent now. I'm writing books and doing writing. Magazines and stuff sometimes will be interested, and it's sort of a good bit of experience. But most of all, I just really love doing this. It's still a fun thing, and there's so many levels about candy that I love. The book this mini comic that I'm working on is about candy. I'm working on a book about candy. I love so many aspects of candy, not just eating it, but sort of the traveling, the culture, everything like that around it. So Candy Critic sort of has kept up with me forever. And I've been able to travel all different kinds of places because of Candy Critic and see different things. When I went to Belgium, I could go into, I told people who I was in chocolate stores, and they would give me behind the scenes tours and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's just like there's a sort of great thing that Candy Critic has given me, and so I don't foresee ever not doing it. I've had other jobs while I've been doing Candy Critic. It's a nice thing about Candy Critic is I can kind of do other things a lot of the times while I do it, be it whether it's directly related to Candy Critic or not. Sometimes I'm doing jobs that are very Candy Critic centric, and sometimes I'm not. But yeah, it's so. I mean, that was pretty much it. After the popularity of the Food Network thing, it's sort of kept up pretty well. And there's more Candy Critic. I don't know if I was the first. I think I was one of the early ones. But all the rest of us, a lot of the people who review Candy, I think they're great people. I love the thing. It's not really a contest for me because I think we all have different styles and different things that we do and different things that we review and everything like that. And we talk about whether we agree and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm happy where Candy Critic is, and I'm going to keep doing it for a while. And it's been a great time, and there's been some really cool stuff, and maybe there'll be some more cool stuff in the future. And if not, it doesn't matter. I have this cool list of all the candy I've ever eaten over the last many years. So, and I've learned how to make candy. I've had some amazing experiences, some of which I'll be talking about later on this podcast, where I'll talk about some of the other experiences that I've had being the Candy Critic and things that I've gotten to do because I'm the Candy Critic and people I've gotten to talk to and meet because I'm the Candy Critic. So, one last swig of this very weird banana milk. And, well, thanks for listening to the first episode of Junk Food and You. I guess, as always, you can follow us on Twitter, @CandyCritic, or go to candycritic.org and find links to all of our other social media, including Instagram and Twitter. We're going to try and do this regularly. Be it I'll talk to people, friends, family, people that are into candy, or I'll just tell stories about, being the Candy Critic. You can also, this is available on YouTube. I'm shooting video while I do this. Don't know how interesting this video is going to be because I've been drawing and I've been, just sort of yammering and talking. But, if you like video content, I might have some pictures of some of the stuff that I'm talking about while I'm doing this too, so I might edit some of that in. But yeah, and of course, again, just go to candycritic.org. You can also follow us on Patreon. There's previews, Friday videos, all kinds of stuff like that on our Patreon. Make sure to check that out as well. It also helps support the site. Also, the mini comic that I'm doing. One of the cool things about it is if you are a patron at a certain level, you'll get copies of the mini comic that'll be just part of your deal. So that's kind of cool. But thanks for listening to the first episode of the new rebooted Junk Food and You. I hope there's more episodes in the future, and have a good day. Bye.